The summer days always felt long and hot in the small towns of California. In the morning, when the school buses traveled through the town's lanes, the sun's light seemed to spread over the wet grass. Each family knew their children would go safely, study, and return in the afternoon. But one particular afternoon became different, the day a yellow school bus and the 26 children inside it suddenly vanished. At first, no one took the matter too seriously. In small American towns, parents patiently wait if a school bus is a few minutes late. But after an hour passed, the restlessness began. Parents called the school, which confirmed the bus had left on time, the driver was there, and everything was normal. Then, slowly, panic descended on every home in the town. The bus had been on a rural road, one that was usually quiet, passing by farms and dry fields. Almost no cars drove on that road in the intense midday sun. A few farmers said they had seen a yellow vehicle in the distance, but they hadn't paid attention to where it went. From that point on, the bus seemed to have been completely lost to the entire town. The police were called, and the county sheriff's office dispatched patrol cars one after another. Checkpoints were set up on the roads. Yet, there was no trace of the bus. That night, local television news announced that a school bus with 26 children was missing. For American families, this was a nightmare. Parents who usually finished work and sat down to dinner with their families were sitting in anxiety that night, as the lights and sirens of police cars swirled through the town. The first night passed in uncertainty. No one could sleep. The children's names were read one by one on the news, as if to inform the entire country that a shadow had fallen over their young lives. The driver was also gone. Everyone knew the driver, he had been driving the same route for many years. His family also grew worried, as he too was missing. On the morning of the second day, helicopters were brought in, combing forests and hilly areas. Farmhouse owners checked their fields for any unusual signs. But the bus's color was so bright yellow it seemed impossible to hide. Yet, it was nowhere to be found. The children's parents gathered in front of the school. Some held photo frames, others torn school uniforms. Cries and shouts mixed in the midday sun. Television news vans arrived, and live broadcasts began. All of America was watching this small town, where a group of children had seemingly vanished into thin air. Some of the children were only 6 years old, others 10 or 11. They had boarded the bus that day laughing, just like any other day. No one could have imagined that this journey would be their last, leading into a long and unknown mystery. Inside the bus, small bags, lunchboxes, and water bottles were left behind, as if in preparation to get off at school, yet the destination was never reached. On the third day, federal agents arrived. Black FBI cars entered the town. Everyone knew now that the matter was very serious. The media pressure intensified, creating a nationwide stir. The front pages of newspapers carried headlines, "Where did America's children go?" Talk show hosts debated, was this a planned abduction? A religious sect? Or just a tragic accident? But if it were an accident, there would have been signs. Federal agents began investigating the backgrounds of the children's families. They looked for any animosities, any threats received. But each family was completely ordinary farmers, shopkeepers, teachers, none of them wealthy or influential. So who could have done such a thing? On the fourth day, a procession marched down the town's main road. Parents, neighbors, and school teachers walked with posters in their hands. The name of each child on the bus was written in large letters. Pictures of that procession were printed the next day in major newspapers like the New York Times. Police checkpoints were set up along the highways surrounding the town. Trucks, vans, and private cars were all searched. The bus's description was announced on the radio every hour. But still, there was no progress. By the fifth day, rumors began to spread. Some said they had seen lights behind the distant hills at night, as if something was hidden. Some claimed it was a government conspiracy, a secret experiment. Others suggested foreign spies had taken the children. The townspeople were exhausted and terrified. Yet, not a single scratch or a tire mark from the bus could be found. The children's classmates drew pictures in their notebooks, friends' faces, bus images, with "When will you come back?" written in large letters next to them. Teachers stood silently in class, unable to say anything. Meanwhile, law enforcement looked farther, inside the hills, in abandoned mines. Some thought the bus might have been buried underground. At that time, many abandoned tunnels lay near industrial areas within America. Every possible location was searched. Days went by, but no answer came. Parents would touch their children's rooms at night, seeing small blankets still neatly folded on the bed, toys scattered, as if they would return at any moment. But they never did. False claims came over the phone lines. Some said they had the children and demanded money. The police found all of them to be hoaxes. Yet, time was ticking away, and each passing day meant more uncertainty. A month passed. The town became eerily quiet. On lampposts by the road, on store windows, on church walls, pictures of the children were plastered. The word "missing" was written in red ink. Church priests held daily prayers, and the entire community would kneel. But there was no answer. When 2 months had gone by, many assumed the children would never be found. Some families moved to other towns, unable to live with the unbearable emptiness. But a few families stubbornly held on, refusing to give up until the truth was known. Years passed. Initially, the news media that printed daily reports gradually lost interest. Only occasionally, an anniversary report would be published, the unsolved mystery. Hope still shone in the parents' eyes, but fatigue was clearly etched on their faces. A new generation of children slowly began going to school in the town. They would hear that a bus had once disappeared on this very road. It sounded unbelievable, but the story became a part of their lives. This mystery seemed to have been etched into the fabric of the town over time. On hot summer afternoons, when a yellow bus came to pick up new children, parents would pause. A shadow of another bus, from another time, seemed to flicker before their eyes. Time marched on the town's calendar. Years changed, seasons turned. But the names of the empty bus and the 26 children remained hanging on every wall, in every conversation. A small memorial was built at the corner of the town's main street. The name of each child was engraved there, alongside the driver's. Every year in mid-July, candles were lit there. Initially, the whole town gathered, but slowly, attendance dwindled. Some had moved to other towns, unable to bear facing that pain repeatedly. Still, a few families continued to return year after year to light candles. The children's siblings grew up. When they went to school, everyone looked at them differently. As if they were living shadows of the missing. No one could interact with them normally. Teachers always showed a little extra compassion, and classmates sometimes kept their distance. These children understood at a young age how the history of a town could be burdened upon their shoulders. The town's business side was also impacted. Tourists who once came to see the nearby hills now started visiting more often to hear the story of the missing school bus. A few local shops began selling old newspaper clippings and copies of photos. Some made postcards with the bus's picture on them. On the other hand, many residents were angered by this. To them, it was just paying, and someone was using it for business. Every few years, an investigative journalist or writer would return to the town. They would seek out the parents and conduct long interviews. Articles would be printed in newspapers. Families demand a new investigation into the mystery. These reports would stir up new waves of discussion for a few weeks, but then everything would go back to how it was before. The FBI would occasionally reopen the old files. They would try to re-evaluate old evidence with new technology. But there was no evidence to begin with. No tire marks, no clear description from any eyewitnesses. The bus had seemingly vanished into the air. One agent once commented, "It's simply impossible, something like this can't happen anywhere on Earth." Yet, it had. For the parents, the concept of time became different. For them, each day was divided into two parts: the day their children were there, and the day since they weren't. Birthdays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, the absence became even heavier during all celebrations. No one wanted to cut a cake, some left an empty chair at the table, as if their child might return and sit down. But the chair remained empty every time. Some families wanted to believe their children were alive somewhere. They would go to doctors or psychologists, but they couldn't let go of their belief. If an unknown child was seen wandering in any town, they would think it might be their lost child. The police would be informed, DNA tests would be conducted, a glimmer of hope would appear, and then it would be extinguished again. Meanwhile, in American society at large, the event slowly became a legend. It became a topic of discussion on television crime shows. Animations were created to show how the bus might have been hijacked, or where it could be hidden. Viewers would sit in front of the TV, absorbed in the mystery, then change the channel. But for the families, it was a grief, a wound that never healed. The new generation in the town grew up listening to this story. Children would be afraid in their beds at night, thinking another bus might disappear. Parents would try to reassure them, but they themselves couldn't feel at ease. A teacher who taught the missing children quit her job. She wrote in her diary, "Every day I stand in the class, I feel the empty chairs watching me." Some parts of that diary were later published in the local newspaper. Readers were filled with fear and sadness. Around the town, there were several old railway tracks that were no longer in use. Teenagers would sometimes hang out there and take pictures. Some would say the bus might have been taken somewhere along those tracks. Although there was no proof, the rumors continued to spread. Some people offered a different explanation. They said it was something supernatural, perhaps aliens had taken the children. In the 70s and 80s, when UFO theories became popular in America, this incident was merged with them. UFO researchers would occasionally appear on TV and claim, the entire bus may have been lifted into the sky. The town's residents were annoyed, but no one listened to their opinions. The question, however, remained: how could no trace of the bus be found? Not even tire tracks. No matter how absurd each rumor seemed, a sense of unease lingered among the people. Years later, newcomers building houses in the town would sometimes find old metal parts when digging in the ground. They would immediately report it to the police, thinking it might be a part of the bus. But tests would reveal they were just pieces of farm machinery or old car wreckage. The disappointment would descend once again. When the missing children's siblings became adults, they started their own movement. They formed an organization called the Voices of the Lost. They met with Congress, demanding new laws to create a special unit for the rapid investigation of child disappearance cases. Their movement brought about some changes at the federal level. But their main question, where are the bus and the children, was never answered. And so, time continued. 10 years, 15 years, then 20 years. The town changed. New highways were built, old roads were closed. Shops changed, and a new generation arrived. But the memory of the bus never faded. On hot summer afternoons, when a school bus passed by, the town's elders would stop and look. In their eyes, the image of that one afternoon still lingered, when 26 children and a driver vanished forever from everyone's sight. Time was passing, but the shadow of the mystery was growing darker. This incident spread beyond the town's borders, becoming a story told in many American states. In some places, People sitting at bar counters would discuss it. Did you hear? A bus with 26 kids vanished in one day? The other would laugh lightly and say, "Oh, that's just a tall tale." But some believed it with all their heart. In the late 70s and early 80s, when television became a new driver of culture in America, several TV series were made based on this incident. They added fictional elements. In some, the bus was kidnapped by a crime syndicate; in others, it was transported to another planet. Viewers were wonderfully captivated by these. But the families in the town would shudder watching them on TV. For them, it wasn't entertainment, but an open wound of pain. Politicians also used the incident for their own gain. When elections approached, some would promise, "We will bring strict laws to prevent child disappearances." Pictures of the missing bus were held up during rallies and speeches. But once the votes were cast, everything was forgotten. For the families, these were just political shows, with no real help coming. Meanwhile, the children who were classmates grew up. They went to college, got jobs, and started families. But a void always remained within them. At a party, or a get-together, they would suddenly fall silent, thinking of that friend who might have been sitting next to them. Many sought psychological help, as the memories haunted them throughout their lives. This incident created a new fear in American society. Parents could no longer have complete faith in school buses. They would keep an eye on the TV screen while eating breakfast, to see if another child had gone missing. That fear gave birth to new discussions about school security. Slowly, rules like CCTV cameras, ID cards, and bus GPS systems began to be implemented in many schools. People might not have realized it, but the driving force behind it was that old, unsolved mystery. It also found a place in culture. In folk songs, short poems, and urban legends, the bus returned again and again. Some singers made songs about the invisible yellow bus that left with children one day and never returned. In cafes in small American towns, those songs would be heard playing, and upon hearing them, many would feel a pang of unknown sadness. In some parts of Central America, superstitions grew around this event. Some would say that if you drove on a lonely highway late at night in the summer, you could sometimes hear the sound of an invisible bus. Some claimed to have seen it, a faint flickering light, the sound of children's laughter in the distance. These stories were spread by teenagers sitting around campfires, to create a spooky atmosphere at night. Slowly, truth and fiction became intertwined. A university's sociology department began a study on how an event spreads through generations, and how culture is built around fear. They interviewed the town's residents, archived the family's photos, and collected TV and newspaper clippings. Their research findings were published in academic journals. It was written there, "The missing school bus is not just a case of crime or accident, it has left a permanent mark on the entire American psyche." On the other hand, a part of the media increasingly turned it into a mysterious package. Tabloid newspapers had headlines like, "Do the ghosts of the bus passengers still wander?" Readers would buy them for cheap thrills and put them on their living room tables. But the families wouldn't read them, they wanted to stay away from such things. Years passed. Still, every time a new disappearance occurred in America, the media would again bring up the old story. It became a kind of reference point, this might be another mystery like the previous one. And each time, the residents of the town would be plunged into grief all over again. Some writers also used the incident in literature. Characters were created in novels, imagined as having been on the bus. Dramatic scenes were created in movies, where the children went to some unknown world. These gave viewers a feast of imagination, but for the real families, every scene was like a knife to their pain. Sometimes, when a new police officer was assigned to the town, he would reportedly first read the old files. It had become a ritual, whoever works in this town must know the mystery of the yellow bus. Old officers would tell the new ones, "Look, there are no clues." Always remember, sometimes there are no answers. The state governor once visited the town and said, "This mystery perhaps reminds us of the limitations of our law enforcement. We cannot answer all questions." His words were printed in the newspaper, but the people of the town found no solace in them. They wanted to find their children, not just words. And so, the years continued. The classmates who were children back then became elderly. The new generation heard from their mouths, "One day, a school bus vanished in our town." To the children, it sounded like a fairy tale, and they looked on with disbelief. But for those who had witnessed it, a shadow of fear and a burden of grief still remained in their eyes. As time moved even further ahead, the story of the missing school bus slowly became ingrained in every brick and stone of the town. The new generation born later had never seen those children, but they knew their names. Because on the walls of the school corridor, there were large pictures with the words 26 lost children, as if it were a silent school that reminded every student of the town's unsolved history. Teachers would occasionally tell new batches, "You might not know, but many years ago, a bus left from here and never returned." The students would listen quietly. Some would laugh in disbelief, others would be startled. But the story would spread again from house to house, at dinner tables, in gatherings. With time, historians began to write about the subject more deeply. Some said it was a symbol of the fragility of small-town America, where everything that felt safe could suddenly disappear. Others said it was a permanent allegory of grief, one that reminds society that it can never find the answer to every question. 20 to 25 years passed. The town's appearance changed. Old farms gave way to shopping malls. New resorts were built on the hillsides. But on the walls of the mall, on the doors of cafes, inside the library, somewhere, the pictures of the missing children still remained. They had become an invisible presence within the town, impossible to forget.